From the high desert of Boulder, Colorado, a mile above the sea level portion of what I call the Babylon Matrix, this is Jonathan Zapp of ZappOracle.com, and this is the video version of Take the Orange Pill. Trumpocalypse reveals that you live in a simulated matrix. Now, this is October 23rd, 2 weeks before the election of 2024, and this was originally written before the inauguration of 2017 after the results of the 2016 election. But since then, new evidence has accumulated that I think gives well-documented evidence, which will appear later in this video, that I think gives very strong evidence that we either live in a simulated matrix or that something extremely paranormal, riddled with mandala effects and that kind of thing, is going on with the Donald Trump phenomena, and that will be presented later in this video. So please hang on for that. Does it feel like there is a Donald Trump-sized splinter in your mind you can't get out? Does it feel like this is the election that's been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth? Does the Trumpocalypse still seem unreal? In addition to getting at what the Trumpocalypse reveals about the nature of the Matrix, this one article will explain the evolution of life on this planet, all of history, and how you can hack the Matrix source code to have a successful life. So, we become accustomed to the unreality that Donald Trump was president and might be again. I remember John Oliver talking about, his inability to say the words President Trump, that it was like saying the words horse pope or something like that. There is just something surreal about it that we have gotten so accustomed to that no matter what Donald Trump says, no matter how fantastically inappropriate, talking recently about the penis size of a deceased golfer in Pennsylvania and so forth, none of it phases anyone because we've just become accustomed to it. But we need to pull the camera back and see the intense surreality to really understand what's going on. And the reality is not only stranger than you think, it's stranger than you can think. So, it's time to wake up to the actuality that it isn't just a feeling or a metaphor. We actually do live in a reality show. And that's why we had a reality show president, and might again. But that reality show is a matrix whose source code has been written to favor story-intensifying plot developments and story-intensifying protagonists and antagonists. The evolution of life on this planet does not so much illustrate natural selection as manipulated story selection. This is close to what Terence McKenna meant when he said, and he got it from Alfred North Whitehead, that the universe favors novelty. And by the way, if my tone sounds a bit whimsical and jokey, and you think I must be kidding, think again. Even financial analysts at Bank of America say there is a 50% chance we are living in a simulated reality. The jokey tone is for two reasons. One, because it's the holidays, at least it was when I first wrote this in 2016 to 17. The official start of the Trumpocalypse is 3 weeks from now, so I'm heavily sugarcoating the revelations. I was just finding that when I think about what's going on with the election and so forth, it's so anxiety-provoking that humor is necessary, and also humor is necessary because it is one of the great tools to oppose totalitarianism, which is often characterized by its humorlessness. And another reason is that when you live in a story-centric matrix, it's crucial not to take what you or anyone else thinks too seriously, especially since reality itself is in a state of flux. So humor is really the the only intelligent way to perceive the reality. A humorless view is too literal a view, and therefore it's not actually grappling with the reality as it's presenting itself to us. Let's begin by considering the cast of characters that populated this spherical island in space before central casting evolved Homo sapiens to heighten the entertainment value of this matrix. Before the dinosaurs, the Earth was covered with tiny microbes, mainly bacteria. And for a few billion years, it wasn't until, I forget what they were called, but some new type of cell evolved that was capable of more genetic novelty, and they believed it happened just in one place at one time, because otherwise we would still just have a world of bacteria. Now, bacteria are interesting microbes, highly adaptable, varied, and necessary for other life. So don't get me wrong. I like bacteria at least as much as the next guy. Respect. I have trillions of bacteria living in my own body, and I take probiotics, so I'm probiotic, I'm pro-bacteria. But to paraphrase Donald Trump, nobody has more respect for bacteria than I do. But let's face it, size does matter. Unless you're a microbiologist, the bacteria story is not something that can hold your attention past a certain point. For example, you probably haven't heard of anyone binge watching a cable series where all the characters are bacteria. Bacteria are awesome. They make great cultures. But from the story structure point of view, they're basically doing the same shit over and over again for billions of years. They serve practical purposes, and that's why after billions of seasons, their story is still going, but in the background, mainly as a nearly invisible supporting cast to the main players. The Earth story doesn't really get interesting until the dinosaurs come along. Put yourself in the perspective of future versions of us, or some more advanced ET species, or super AIs that have superseded us and use quantum computing or some other means to create matrices. Visionaries from many cultures and eras have recognized that there is a manipulative, illusion-generating species running our show. The Gnostics, in the Nag Hammadi library, nearly 2,000-year-old documents improbably discovered in 1945 by a Bedouin peasant named Muhammad Ali, if you can believe that. And the Nag Hammadi library was also what inspired the graphic novel that was later turned into the movies The Matrix. And these were discovered right at the end of our last apocalypse, World War II. And they spell it out for us, the Gnostics did, just as the Hindus and many other visionary cultures have. We live in Maya, the Hindus tell us, and Maya means matrix, which means mother. And they meant an artificial realm of illusion. The Gnostics called the matrix masters the archons. Instead of saying matrix masters a million times, I refer to these entities, as the Gnostics did, as archons. Does that mean I know exactly who they are? No. But archon means master of deception, I believe. So please don't take that to infer anything too mystical. When I say archons, technological materialists like Elon Musk, who's now gone off the deep end and supports Trump, great genius technologically, says infinitely dumb things, counterfactual things related to politics, because one of the principal ideas of my perspective is that we have a mass psychosis. I'll be recording videos about that soon, on both the left and on the right. So you can have somebody with a very high IQ and they can still be taken over by a mass psychosis. Happens all the time. In fact, they discovered that that people who join cults tend to have higher IQs than average. And I would think the reason is that if you live more in your mind, you are more capable of being taken over by a, well, like Elon describes, not inappropriately, wokeism as a mind virus, not realizing he's been taken over by an orange mind virus, the mass psychosis on the other side. And these two sides, or symbiotic. The excesses of wokeism provoke the excesses of mass psychosis on the right. Mass psychosis on the left, aka wokeism, is more obnoxious, but mass psychosis on the right is far more dangerous. It's something I will develop later and in subsequent videos, because there's just a very proven track record. We don't see cultures being taken over by totalitarian wokeism, but we do see again and again countries being taken over by classic totalitarianism, and Trump is been saying even recently incredibly totalitarian type things. Like very recently, he's been saying that he would use the National Guard and the military to take care of his political opponents, and he specifically mentions Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi, so don't fool yourself into some Republicans trying to say, oh, he was talking about the immigrants or something like that. They are consciously lying. They know he wasn't, and he's clarified that. So, see if I can catch up to my place here. So people like Elon Musk and other scientifically well-informed people believe that there are intelligent entities, possibly just us in the future, who have developed quantum computing and are now running countless high-res, super complex, avatar-filled simulated realities like ours, what I call the Babylon Matrix. So the most serious figure in this regard is the philosopher Nick Bostrom. I think there are flaws with his view of the simulated reality because he's a physicalist, a materialist, but that's another story. Similarly, thanks to a bit of off-the-shelf hardware called a fish tank, I run a simulated biosphere I've created with air pumps and filters and so forth to create an artificially oxygenated aquatic environment populated by a few dozen fish who live inside a glass box here in my house in Boulder, Colorado. I go to some trouble and expense to keep this matrix, this fish tank, running. But it's not because I am, as my fish might foolishly assume, a loving God who deeply cares about this particular community of a couple dozen fish living in a predator-free, simulated Edenic reality I've created for them with nearly invisible glass walls. I act like a reliable and benign, divine covenant-bound God to my fish, and they probably assume I exist as a supporting entity there to bring them flake food twice a day, and so forth. At this point in their evolution, they lack gnosis and are almost certainly clueless that my actual agenda is entirely selfish. The fish tank is in my house, not for the fish, but solely for my entertainment and that of guests and other people living in the household. For this reason, I chose colorful, interesting-looking fish, the best characters I could cast, to be in this little glass-walled matrix at the back of my living room. So let's say you've set up the Earth matrix for similar reasons. Until the dinosaurs came along, your aquarium wasn't all that interesting to look at. There's only so long you can stare at a sphere covered with microbes and some trilobites crawling around on the bottom of oceans. Similarly, I'm not going to put up with an aquarium that only has algae growing in it, even though it would be much lower maintenance. The entertainment value of the Earth matrix for the first billion years or so is maybe a 1 or 2 out of 10. But as soon as you evolve boring microbes into dinosaurs, gargantuan meat puppets with armor plating and giant claws glistening with dozens of switchblades who are having epic fights to the death, your production values and entertainment factor of your matrix have shot up to a 5 or 6. If your Archon household includes boys, your matrix is like an endlessly running Saturday morning cartoon show with all these cool-looking giant rock'em sock'em carnivorous meat puppets tearing each other apart. But after a while, the kids grow out of that, and the whole dinosaur story gets super repetitive. It was a cool series, renewed for several million seasons. But eventually, every series runs its course and needs to get canceled to make way for more novel reality shows. So, quick intervention. You toss a smallish Manhattan-sized asteroid toward this little island in space, and the kinetic energy of that asteroid is so great that it basically, as Terrence put it, flattens anything larger than a chicken. Talk about a dramatic series finale, and that was 66 million years ago. We got that series finale. Then we got a few years of nuclear winter and chaos. It's actually more than a few years. It took 100,000 years just for forests to come back. And but there was still a relatively dramatic zone between series. And then because we canceled the dinosaurs, we get a way more interesting story, a hot-blooded new series called The Mammals. Entertainment value is up to a solid 7. The cast of mammalian characters is way more varied and colorful and keeps evolving. And the series keeps running for millions of seasons, even though recently a lot of character types called species have gotten canceled because they are superfluous to the main storyline. And so they've gotten canceled by the pollution and so forth and predation of Homo sapiens, the main storyline. After a while, the drama value of watching yet another saber-toothed tiger ripping apart yet another antelope or whatever becomes very same old, same old. The entertainment value of non-hominid mammalian species drops to about a 3. Today, it's even lower. You can calculate this statistically by comparing the number of streaming shows featuring all other mammals, or certainly many nature shows, but compare that to shows predominantly featuring Homo sapiens, and it's like probably 1%. But you don't want to just cancel on the mammals. Millions of years of evolution have created so much high production value, natural scenery, and all these colorful little Muppets. Some of these mammals are warm and fuzzy and cute and almost Ewok-like, koala bears and pandas and so forth, while other mammals are cool-looking stone-cold killers like tigers. And there's no need to waste all of that. So what you do is demote them to extras and supporting cast and nearly extinct some of them, but gradually shift the storyline to these more complex, interesting creatures, the hominids. You keep evolving the hominids until you have 2 intertwined major series, the Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Eventually it becomes clear that the more vicious of these 2 hominid species, the Homo sapiens, have much more story potential. So the Neanderthals get voted off the island, and you allow Homo sapiens to xenocide them, at least so some theories conjecture, to focus your matrix on the more story-intensifying species. At their best, Homo sapiens have brought the entertainment value of your matrix to an 8. But after a while, these Stone Age cultures who keep making the same stone axes, flint axes for millennia and millennia, keep doing the same shit over and over again with negligible cultural novelty, get pretty boring. They had a good run, but after a while, they just seem so dated, so Pleistocene. So now it's time to send in the black monoliths and magic mushrooms and so forth and do some genetic engineering, a major wetware upgrade. You throw more processing power into their language centers, etc., so they can start making their own stories and become self-aware avatars who can recognize the need for drama and novelty. Eventually, these upgrades result in a major new epic reality show called History. And History is a spectacle-filled, hot-blooded his story, a patriarchal, great man theory, male character-based epic with over-the-top characters and spectacular battle scenes, and you name it. The novelty is endless. Now you've got a cast of artificially intelligent, slightly self-aware avatars who recognize the need for drama and novelty. The History show can mostly run itself, but you still tweak things and make interventions here and there. For example, nuclear weapons were this incredibly dramatic development of one of the most dramatic miniseries of all time called World War II. You let the avatars set off a couple of really small ones as a pyrotechnic miniseries finale. But after that, as your avatars start to develop more and more powerful nukes, such as hydrogen bombs, you recognize that these are potential plot spoiler devices, the sort of MacGuffin that many plot lines can circle around, but that must never go off. For the first time in the history show, you allow 70 years, and maybe now it's like close to 80 years, to go by with a new sort of weapon not being used. We never find that anywhere in human history. You also allow multiple witnesses in both the US and the Soviet Union, and I believe modern day Russia, and there have been books written about them. There's a link given in the article version. To observe some of your interventions, UFOs appearing above nuclear missile silos and disabling launch codes and otherwise manipulating them. And that's really well documented. It's one of the more well documented parts of ufology. And again, there's a major book on the subject and all kinds of stuff you can find online. Gradually, you are setting up the ultimate series finale called The Singularity. And you can see my book, the second, you can buy it on Amazon, called Crossing the Event Horizon, Human Metamorphosis and the Singularity Archetype. And you can also read it for free, the second edition, on zaporacle.com. And so this is the thing that we're really heading toward. This is the major finale of Homo sapiens, and it's kind of a Truman Show, Twilight Zone type denouement where your avatars are going to realize they are avatars, and that's what this video is. Think of it as like a black monolith appearing in the wasteland of modern culture that is signaling that awakening of the avatars. Meanwhile, you've got to keep things interesting and dramatic, even improbably dramatic, so that your avatars eventually start to catch on and get the joke. But right now, we have a chance to get the joke sooner than the Archons want. All those billions of seasons of plot-enhancing development in the Babylon Matrix have led right up to the present moment. The prequel we are in right now, just before the epic new series, the Trumpocalypse, takes over. And that was, again, because it was written just before the inauguration. But now with that series may be coming back, and it never went away because in the 4 years of the relative boredom of the Biden-Harris administration, the Trumpocalyptic series has been going on in the background, threatening to become the sequel. And that could very well happen. The election is only 2 weeks away. The Babylon Matrix has been running itself, driven along by this intelligent species of vicious drama queens, always turning out story-intensive products. The Archons get arrogant and negligent and allow any Archon to do whatever to this Matrix just to keep the entertainment going. And then, not very long ago, a bored Archon boy, at least this is my theory, a particularly juvenile and sadistic Archon boy of the sort that lives on Adderall and ultra-sour candy and who might, on some rainy afternoon, toss an M80 into his boring plastic ant farm to see what will happen, steps up to the Homo sapiens Matrix control panel. As dramatic as history is, there aren't enough explosions. And it's like I heard George Carlin on the Art Bell show once, and George Carlin lived in California, and Art Bell asked Carlin what he thought of earthquakes, and he kind of sighed and said, "Well, Art, I really like earthquakes, but they're never big enough." So this is the kind of entertainment-oriented mentality that the Archons view our whole reality. I call it the Babylon Matrix. As dramatic as history is, there aren't enough explosions and whatnot to hold this Archon boy's oops, got to fix a couple of errors here. All right. So the Archon boy starts this huge, high-stakes, high-novelty election in the only superpower nation state of the Babylon Matrix, at least in 2016. Some could say that China is another superpower, but not quite at our level yet. And that election comes down to a choice between two lead characters, Clinton and Trump, in other words. One is the most qualified, most politics as usual type, most monotonous presidential candidate of all time, almost. And the other is the world's most popular reality television star, the least qualified candidate of all time, an orange-colored, fire-breathing monster clown trickster named Donald Trump. Which of these sounds like the most story-intensifying character? But there's a slight problem. A majority of the avatars voting for the next lead character have been programmed with too much common sense and survival instinct. And they actually prefer to vote for the drama-killing character. Let's remember she did win the popular vote by about close to 3 million votes. Polling has never been so sophisticated and accurate. At least so we thought. And 100% of the polls were predicting the drama-killing character would win. Hillary. What's a sadistic Archon boy to do? Well, now we know what he did. He named his meant-to-win trick card character Trump. And Trump means a trick-winning card. Remember, they originally came from a German family named Drumpf, D-R-U-M-P-F, but they seemed to know the role that they were meant to play, and they renamed themselves Trump. And so the Archon boy with the worst kind of heavy-handed Deus Ex Machina manipulation gives him an electoral college trick win, which every poll almost said was nearly impossible. And now all the sensible avatars, the sort of ones who voted for no drama Obama, are frustrated and know they've been tricked somehow. But lots of these folks are a bit naive. For example, many of them still stubbornly cling to facts. They just don't realize how stupid it is to cling to facts when you live in a fiction-based matrix. This is why the Oxford Dictionary's word of the year is post-truth. Get it? Truman is starting to catch on. That's Truman of The Truman Show, not the ex-president. Time to wake up and smell the juvenile archonic source code, sheeple. The facts are just a bunch of temporary data points that any Archon boy can shift at any moment for story purposes. Story-intensifying fiction trumps boring facts every time. You can drive yourself and everybody crazy whining about carbon and climate change, and meanwhile, anytime it served a story purpose, this Archon boy could just set off a supervolcano like Yellowstone and throw us into nuclear winter. Not man-made at all. All your sensible, fact-based climate change worry will just make you look stupid at that point, and you're just baiting Archon Jr. to trigger Yellowstone so that he can make what you assumed was the factual story blow up in your face, literally. In general, if you want to succeed in a fiction-based matrix, then be the best reality show star you can be, not a fact-based dinosaur. And there'll be more about this winning strategy for succeeding in life in the Babylon Matrix. And that strategy is to be the best reality show star you can be. You want to be a story-intensifying character. Otherwise, you are just a statistic. So, to recap, an obviously heavy-handed and immature Archon boy designs an orange monster clown trickster avatar to be an improbable winner. In an over-the-top wink at the Avatar Collective, he even names him Trump, which actually means a trick winning card. Get it? The Archon in charge of this matrix gives you a huge Negan of the Walking Dead, we know I'm just fucking with you smirk. Trump is as over-the-top obvious a character name as Cruella de Vil. Get some subtlety, Archon Jr. I don't mind living in a story, but these names are killing me. Why does it have to be such a cartoonish allegory? I get the joke already. So you can please stop giving Republican antagonist avatars over-the-top names like Newt Gingrich, Rush Limbaugh, Dick Armey, Tom DeLay, Trent Lott, And of course, now head of the RNC, at least in 2016, and a key Trump ally, soon to be his chief of staff. I know General Kelly quickly took over that role, though. Reince Priebus. Who are you kidding? What mother who is not part of an extraterrestrial bat species names their child Reince Priebus? You're just fucking with us with these ridiculous names. And now, and Jung had this name synchronicity theory. You know, he pointed out a lot of people would have these names that looked like they were intentionally created to represent what they were going to do. So we just had the end of a avatar, a character, who was everyone recognizes as the father of October 7th, this brutal massacre of Jews. And what was his name? Yahya Sinwar. Okay, Yahya speaks for itself. But the last name, forget how it's pronounced, is Sin, S-I-N-W-A-R. And what did he create? A sinful war. Sinful on both sides, of course. But I mean, it's just like, you got to be kidding me. These names are just so over the top. It's like, Dickens had this tendency. He'd have like a villainous character in David Copperfield to the evil stepfather called Murdstone. Okay. The only one who came up with really cool names was Tolkien, who was a philologist, a master linguist, and was able to get into the underlying sounds of languages to come up with cool names like Mordor and Sauron and Saruman and Galadriel and Lothlorien and all that kind of thing. But most people, when they try and make these names, are just like these over the top, on the nose names like Darth Vader, like Dark Invader, and so on. Sinwar, come on. But so you just know that you're being fucked with these ridiculous names. But who am I to talk when I was born with the last name Zapp, not shortened on Ellis Island? But I get the joke. I am the avatar that some subtler archon sent to zap the collective by finally putting the orange pill in the center of a jokey, candy-coated online article/video. So even though I have just offered the single most crucial revelation ever created, this is also the most humble day of my life. I'm just playing a role I was assigned. Like Trump, I too am a pre-programmed avatar meant to play a specific story-intensifying function, which I have hereby performed. But if I play my role just right, if I can get all of you to make this article go viral or this video go viral, I will have played my role too well for archonic purposes. And another way to defeat the archonic purposes, it should be quite obvious, is to not vote for Trump, but to vote for the only viable alternative, Harris, because then you'll be defeating their obvious manipulation. Too many avatars will have their Truman Show awakening and get the joke, and the Trumpocalypse storyline will have to shift or risk a loss of novelty. This is why I say I am optimistic. We are smarter than they think we are, and they allowed the dumbest of archons to come up with this ridiculous Trumpocalypse storyline. The archonic fingerprints on the Trumpocalypse miniseries are clearly the ultra-sour candy-smeared fingers of an attention-deficit, dumbed-down, sadistic Archon boy who probably gets bullied by other Archon boys and is tossing in Donald Trump like an M80 into an ant farm. The ridiculously over-the-top Trumpocalypse story is clearly not the product of the sharpest Archon in the Archon shed. A mature puppet master doesn't let the strings show. No well-educated, mentally stable adult Archon would pull such a juvenile stunt. Our reality is riddled with mandala effects inserted into the past that indicate how clumsily the Trump timeline was pasted into our reality. For example, and so here's some of the incontrovertible, I think, documented evidence to show you that Trump is not some coincidence, but a clear story-intensifying, over-the-top intervention. In November 2016, a clip from an episode of the 1950s Western television series Trackdown was published to YouTube, along with the claim that it predicted Donald Trump by featuring a snake oil salesman character named Trump, who claimed that only he could prevent the end of the world, wait for it, by building a wall around the town. Snopes judged the claim to be true. The television series Trackdown really did produce an episode featuring a Trump character who came to town claiming that only he could prevent the end of the world by building a wall, and he also sold special force-propelling umbrellas to deflect meteorites. The episode, Season 1, Episode 30, aired on CBS in 1958 and was titled The End of the World, featuring actor Lawrence Dobkin playing the role of Walter Trump, the con man who wants to build a wall, get people to give him money to build a wall around the town. A synopsis of the episode from the classic TV archive reads as follows. Walter Trump, a confidence man, puts on a long robe and holds a tent meeting in the town of Talpa. He tells the townspeople that a cosmic explosion will rain fire on the town and that he is the only one that can save them from death. Remember, only I can fix it. Ranger Hobie Gilman attempts to prove Trump is a fraud. And now, even more shocking and even deeper in the past, is the following Mandela effect, or whatever you want to call it. There's a 19th century book series, you can actually find it, it's still sold on Amazon, featuring a character called Baron Trump. In case you don't know, that is also the name, Baron Trump, of Trump's youngest son, the one he had with Melania. And Baron Trump, this kid, has a guide named Don, and has and this has resurfaced conspiracy theories involving former President Donald Trump and his youngest son, Barron. So here, I am quoting from a Newsweek article, probably at too great length, but I will praise Newsweek journalism for this article. Time travel talk was reignited after a viral TikTok on Tuesday, and when the article was published, in other words, and since viewed more than 5.9 million times, discussed Ingersoll Locke's 1888 publication, Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey, and 1896's The Last President. That was a name from, in 1896, of one of these books about Baron Trump. Okay. I'm going to put in the link to the article here. Okay. All right. Okay. Lockwood stories became a hot topic of conspiracy theorists, some of whom claim the Trump family has a time machine after the Republican entered the White House in 2016. In the new video post, user Maddie Iserance said, "I've thought about this every day for the past 2 years. In 1888, a man named Ingersoll Lockwood wrote a book called Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey, where a 10-year-old boy named Baron Trump, who has a mentor named Don, who is a rich man who lives on Fifth Avenue in New York City," that's where Trump Tower is, "he and Don traveled to Russia to find a portal to a magical underground world." The TikTok user pointed out that the book's author lived in New York City at the same time as Serbian-American scientist Nikola Tesla. They both were in Manhattan, I believe, who some conspiracy theorists often suggest was a time traveler. The name of the book's character, Baron, which is short for the Germanic name Wilhelm Heinrich Sebastian von Trump, is further evidence of time travel, according to some. In real life, ex-President Trump descends from German immigrants to the U.S. In the novels, Baron and Dawn discover a portal to a different world. It is this point that conspiracy theories have jumped on in the past. Could Lockwood have been talking about time travel? The thing about time travel is that if it's ever to exist, then it already does, says one comment on the post that received its own 35,000 likes. Pence and the Last President. And again, The Last President was the name of an 1896 novel in this fantasy series. It is the last book of the series that really adds fuel to the conspiracy fire. The Last President, also known as 1900, because it was supposed to take place in 1900. Amid the upheaval of the Trump presidency and post-presidency, some say this book was warning us all along. In the novel, the entire east side of New York City is in a state of uproar in November after a candidate is unexpectedly elected despite opposition to him. It is the tumultuous election of Bryan, B-R-Y-A-N, supported by mobs of vast size that are organizing under the lead of anarchists and socialists. That last part, a direct quote from the novel, that sparks this. So, these groups threaten to plunder and despoil the houses of the rich who have wronged and oppressed them for so many years, unquote. The mob plans to march to a hotel on Fifth Avenue, the site of Trump Tower today, which is on 57th and 5th. The president in the book even appoints a man to his cabinet named Pence, P-E-N-C-E, another striking coincidence given that Trump's vice president was Mike Pence. So, this is why I'm optimistic about the Trumpocalypse and think that what looks apocalyptic and Trumpocalyptic is actually an opportunity to get a critical number of avatars, meaning you all, to wake up within the Babylon Matrix so that we can fundamentally hack the source code. I am about to put my life in danger by revealing the hack that allows me to live an improbably magical life. It disgusts me to admit this, but it is essentially the same hack that Trump is using, only mine is hampered by ethical constraints and standards. I have always lived an improbable magical life, even though, except for the last couple of years, the most money, well, actually it's more than that, but I only really had money since 2015 and a limited amount. But the most money I had access to before that was a school teacher's salary. Now, I was 59 when I wrote this, but I am 66 right now. But people say I could pass for a 63-year-old that hasn't slept in a couple of days. I hope that's true. And yet my life is still extremely magical and adventurous. So at a time of life when it's supposed to be boring. And so, for example, I traveled to 25 countries in 2016. And even though I'm an introverted, cranky, weird, and increasingly old white guy, I continue to be surrounded by interesting young friends. A lot of my closest friends are Gen Z. And I am constantly bombarded with amazing synchronicities, dreams, and visions that happen on a daily basis. And whatever happens to be going through my head, of course, I can instantly publish online. Of course, so can most of us now. Early on, I learned a source code hack. I can tell you in 5 words. And it's not the power of positive thinking. That's how Trump was raised. He and his family were going to see the American minister, Norman Vincent Peale, on Sundays, who talk about this power of positive thinking. It influenced Trump to become a kind of a chaos magician, basically, creating a reality warping field around him. Further, his way of modus operandi further trained by the notorious lawyer Roy Cohn. And apparently there's a new movie out called The Apprentice that's about that apprenticeship with Roy Cohn. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I plan to. If you don't want to know the source code hack to lead a magical life, stop reading now, because it can be like opening Pandora's box. And here it is, just 5 words. Be a story intensifying character. If you make yourself into a story-intensifying character and can get yourself onto a story-intensifying timeline, which we certainly are all on, Matrix source code will recognize that and open doors for you, throw other story-intensifying principal characters your way, and adjust any recalcitrant facts, in quotes, to allow your story to create novelty. Another avatar about my age, except now he's dead, who tapped into this simple hack was Steve Jobs. Everyone talked about how Jobs created a reality distortion field, something they got from Star Trek, around him. Jobs, like Trump, was a narcissist with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. Trump being the easiest psychiatric diagnosis of all time, a malignant narcissist. And Jobs was basically an asshole to most of the people around him, but he was a story-intensifying character. So the Matrix bent around him, even though he was not an engineer, did not have the technical skills of a Bill Gates or Zuckerberg or whatever, but he just had the vision and said, you will do this, knowing less than other of these experts like Bill Gates of what was actually possible. That helped to make him somebody who could just command reality somehow. Does Donald Trump keep winning because he's so smart, as he so often tells us? Is it because he's going to replace everything with something terrific, like he says he's going to do to replace Obamacare? Is it because no one has more respect for women than he does, as he claims? Is it because he was more fact-wielding than Hillary Clinton, or now Harris? No, he won because he was the most improbable, story-intensifying avatar who could possibly have become president. Duh. This should be obvious, people. If Napoleon was a perfect 10 on the history series story intensification character scale, Donald Trump is an 11. If you still don't get it, I'll give you an obvious example of how the story-intensifying source code works. Donald Trump is the world's most successful and famous reality television star. That was the one successful thing. He went bankrupt 6 times. He was only a businessman because his father, Fred Trump, gave him the equivalent in current US dollars of about $450 million, not the $1 million that Trump claimed. But his series, The Apprentice, was extremely successful and popular, and it was basically a poor person's idea of like what a successful rich person was like, and it gave him this avatar-like reputation. So when did the modern reality television era begin? It began with the first season of Survivor, which played out in the year 2000, the year when we were supposed to get an apocalyptic revelation. I think we did. It was that show. The show's creators, the creators of Survivor, were Archon-inspired and controlled, or influenced in some way, because they set up the reality show Matrix within the reality show Matrix, the series Survivor, using the same exact archonic source code that runs the outer Babylon Matrix. Characters were voted off the island based not on their knowledge of facts or high ethics, but according to who intensified the story. Trump survived the 16-person clown car of the Republican nominating process in 2016 because he was by far the most colorful of the 16 clowns. Who of the 16-member tribe won the first season of Survivor? The colorful, manipulative, man you love to hate, immoral asshole, Richard Hatch. Get it? The nice guy doesn't win. It isn't about who the good guy or the bad guy is. It's about who is story intensifying and who isn't. That's why Darth Vader is a much more popular Star Wars character than any other. A danger in revealing this hack is that it is amoral. It will promote the timeline of epic assholes as well as outlier saints. I make every effort to use this hack in ethical ways in accord with my values, and I hope that you will use it to promote love-based timelines and not hate and power-based ones, but that's up to you. If I were willing to wear body armor and a breath mask and use uncanny charisma and the force lightning technique to assist me, especially with a last name like Zap, I would probably end up conquering star systems. I would get far more Matrix resources than I currently get because that would make me such a story-intensifying avatar. But for ethical reasons, I'm just not willing to go there. I have, however, told people that my preferred way of death would be to be struck by a fatal lightning bolt, because that would make me a much more story-intensifying avatar. It'd be great for post-mortem book sales and so forth. Yet to be determined if that will be the end of my personal miniseries. I would get... By the way, I do have actual Sith ancestors, and the Sith are a peace-loving, ethically bound species, though Archon propaganda, in other words, the Star Wars films, would have you think the opposite. And you can see my writings on actual Sith cultures. Actually, I have up on the shelf, see if I can reach it, my great-great-grandfather who grew up in Tsarist Russia, who was named Darth Zap. That wasn't the original. This is the origin of the name Zap, because he was the inventor of the Force Lightning technique. Let me see if I have reached that. Okay, this is a oxidized, very old bronze bust of my ancestor, Darth Zap, the inventor of the Force Lightning technique. The problem with it, of course, the reason why I don't use it is that it's very damaging to your own health. I tried to mitigate that with probiotics and antioxidants and stuff, but there's only so many times you can use the Force Lightning technique before you end up looking like the Emperor in the Star Wars films, even though they're basically propaganda films. Darth Vader is by far the most story-intensifying Star Wars character, and without him, the franchise would be worth nothing. Vader is the one character somewhere in almost every Disney Star Wars film that grabs our interest, while boring good guy type generic characters get anonymously dismembered by his red lightsaber, and nobody cares. Al Gore and Hillary Clinton got more votes, more popular votes, but were dropped from the story because they were too much like Jar Jar Binks. They knew way more facts than their opponents. That's already a fatal flaw. And in general, they were way too story deadening and annoying and a banal way to carry 4 to 8 seasons as the lead character. So recently, where I thought I caught somebody catching on to this, the very oddly named Charlemagne the God said of Biden, he doesn't have major character energy. So that's somebody who's beginning to catch on. Would anyone have kept watching Star Wars if the big reveal in The Empire Strikes Back was that Jar Jar Binks was Link's father? No. Donald Trump is essentially using the same hack I use, but unencumbered by ethics. He has created an anti-cabinet consisting of a bunch of low-budget Batman villains, guys like this guy Miller, who are committed to destroying the very departments they will take over. Horrible, but story-intensifying. He actually talks about central casting in his choice of cabinet members and other people that he hires, and freely admits that he picks supporting characters. Even Secretary of State Tillerson, who later called Trump a fucking moron, he said, he looked like he was sent by central casting to play a Secretary of State, and he was impressed with him because he's a former CEO of Exxon. So he actually picks people because they look the part, and this includes many of the generals that Trump hired, like Kelly, who just today, has said that Trump, chief of the Joint Chiefs of Joint Chiefs, what is it, the top military office in the whole country, General Milley, who worked with Trump for 4 years, said he's fascist to the core. And Kelly, who was his chief of staff, and no one works closer to a president than his chief of staff, has said the same thing, that he is basically a fascist, and who said admiring things about Hitler and so on. And according to Trump's first wife, Ivana, Trump had a book of Hitler's speeches on his bedside table. But World War II was our last totally improbable miniseries, and if I were to tell you, the premise for the series was that an unemployed loser, a failed artist who was taking trips to the occult bookstore, was to almost conquer the planet and use a reversed astrological symbol as the key symbol, the swastika, in other words, of his death cult. You would say all of that was just way over the top. Nobody's going to buy that. But those are all literal facts about Hitler and the Nazis. Trump knows that fiction trumps fact, and that with an outrageously counterfactual 50-character tweet, or now a truth, he can stir up the whole world. He gets exponentially more resources from the Matrix than I do. Giant towers, private jets and helicopters, and now the keys to a superpower, because I allow myself to be boringly bound by ethics, while Trump is the engine of novelty every story, every reality show series needs. A love to hate him, break all the rules, trickster, antagonist. Trump is essentially a Gnostic master gone rogue. He gets the joke. He was sent by the archons, in other words, central casting, a phrase that Trump uses, to do exactly what he's doing. He is following the Tao, the archonic source code, more perfectly than any avatar in the history of the world. Doesn't mean you should vote for him, though. You should vote against him. However, if enough of us avatars with story-intensifying capacity and ethics start hacking the same source code, we can shift everything. The archons may have made there's an example of this key idea, to transform evolution and our reality, was given in one of the very early Star Trek films. And in it, we see a Vulcan, very attractive Vulcan woman. She's got a shaved head, which of course makes anybody far more attractive. She is the captain or seemingly of a Federation starship, but she is being completely hopelessly outgunned by Klingons and so forth, and everything she is trying to do is failing because of that. This is a scenario, it was called the Kobayashi Maru. You can look it up, and then finally the bridge seems to blow up. As if they've all been killed. But then the smoke clears, and now Admiral Kirk, he's been promoted. The doors open. He steps onto the bridge, and we realize we've actually been in a training simulator of a Federation starship bridge. This training scenario, called the Kobayashi Maru, a no-win scenario, was used to see how apprentice Federation starship captains would do under this ultimate stress. The only one that ever solved the Kobayashi Maru was Kirk himself. When he was in that position, he solved it by hacking the simulation computer and changing the simulation so he could win. That is the source code hack. That is what we must do. That is what the human species is good at. We are good at hacking the source code. We've broken atoms down into ever more improbable subatomic particles. We've cracked DNA, and are now manipulating it. This is what we do, and this is what we must do, and this is what the purpose of this video is, to allow you to see the source code that's running this reality so that you can hack into it and begin by not voting for Trump, so that you defeat the archonic manipulators. Anyway, so the archons may have made a crazy, bloodthirsty drama queen species, But they also made us just a bit more self-aware than intended, and they let the most foolish of their children generate the Trumpocalypse, a contrived miniseries anyone can see through. They focused everything on the Trump avatar, and so far haven't noticed that the Zap avatar, as I make this video, might be doing his job a little too well. So assuming I can get this out there on the internet before some Matrix agent with a generic name like Smith or Jones, with a nasal over-enunciated monotone, starts interrogating me or pulls me from the Matrix, like they just did to Princess Leia, who had just died the day I first wrote this, who's only a year older than me, I'm going to share with you the most powerful source code hacks I've learned. The complete collection is to be found on the website, zaporacle.com, where you will also find my free matrix shifting 800 card oracle, the Zap Oracle, a red pill oracle that reconfigures itself to accord with each moment of consultation, and also especially my fantasy sci-fi epic, which can be read free on the website. You can also get it on Amazon as an Audible. I think that's the best version. It's the one that really tries to pull back the curtains to show what's actually going on. So it's available on every form on Amazon, and that would help support this website if you get it there. But you can read it free on the website as well. The first hack, once again, is to shift matrix resources towards you by being a story-intensifying character. Read about story structure, such as the book Story by screenplay guru Robert McKee, and you'll understand some of these story-intensifying principles. For example, one principle of screenplay writing that I employ in my life is that in every scene, something of high value should be at stake. I adapt this to my life by mostly refusing to engage in any small talk. Mundane dialogue does not shift the matrix. I'm an introvert, well entertained in my own inner world. If I'm going to take myself out of that world to talk to someone, I insist that something of high value be at stake in the conversation. You also need to mythologize your life. Mythologize it in a healthy way. See Jungian psychology. Arnold Toynbee, the British historian who analyzed the life cycle of civilizations, discovered that civilizations fell when they no longer had a healthy ruling myth. The source code supports avatars who devote themselves to highly meaningful and interesting mythic life missions, but also darkly mythic ones too. So for example, both Hitler and Churchill had the experience of avoiding assassination by being told to get out of the different door than they would normally get out of their limousine or whatever, to avoid that helped them avoid a landmine that would have killed them. Both of them the same exact intervention. Anyone rich in meaning will be given more of it if you're able to generate meaning and story. And anyone who says they are bored, who lacks meaning and motivation, is doomed. Here is the central line of source code running this matrix. To those whose story is intensifying, give more. From those whose story is dwindling, take away what little they have. This line of code is actually revealed in the Bible, Matthew 13:12, where it says, To he who has much, much more will be given, and to he who has little, even that little would be taken away. Get it? Same thing works with bacteria. Bacteria send out like chemical signals. If they're getting fed well, then other bacteria will join them and so forth. On the dark side, greedy but highly motivated story-intensifying avatars use this code to create massively unequal wealth distribution. So that's what's going on right now. The four wealthiest people in the country have more wealth than the bottom 160 million people. So if you are a huge asshole, like one of those richest people like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, and you want to build penis-shaped rockets and do all that kind of stuff, you'll be given more because you're being story intensifying. Once again, on the dark side, greedy but highly motivated story-intensifying avatars use this code to create massively unequal wealth distribution. Don't let your ego judge what's good and bad. Dark forces are needed for novelty. A story writer is a matrix maker. And if you had to write a story about a character who will develop spiritually, you'll be obliged to create darkness and epic antagonists to spur character and story development. For example, Tolkien's Ring trilogy is a story about ultimate development, the shifting of ages. But if you took away Sauron, Saruman, ringwraiths, orcs, etc., you'd have a stagnant matrix. Hobbits going out on dates with other hobbits and having second and third breakfasts and stuff like that. And that would be really boring. There would be no development. And you can see my article, I think it's also YouTube, called Tolkien and the Developmental Need for Evil. Evolution works by paradox. Here's a quick example. There is one person who has been more of an evolutionary catalyst of the psychoactive potential of the marijuana plant than any other human being who has ever lived. Who is it? The answer is our last entertainer turned president, Ronald Reagan. Reagan intensified the war on drugs. Incarceration skyrocketed while his wife Nancy preached just say no, notoriously ineffective across the country. The border with Mexico was made harder to cross with weed products, diminishing the flow of cheap swag. This created great economic opportunity for domestic grow-ops. Zero tolerance policies encoded penalties based on plant numbers and weight. You had the same risk if you grew low quality weed as if you grew far more profitable per pound super dank weed. With lots of black market money coming in, growers kept working their genetics to make weed many times more potent, more concentrated in THC than it was a few decades before, to where now weed can cause psychotic episodes because of the extremely high THC concentration. The attempt to oppress something often makes it stronger, or as Princess Leia, who died today, may the Force ease her passing, put it, the more you tighten your grip, Tarquin, the more star systems will slip through your fingers. So, the Trumpocalypse could actually turn out to be a giant evolutionary catalyst. It could be right this second for you if it enlightens you to how the Matrix source code works. The Matrix works based on what I call dynamic paradoxes, and in the article you'll find a link to my most powerful source code hack, my philosophy, my meta-philosophy called dynamic paradoxicalism, the anti-ism-ism. Finally, the Archons overplayed their Trump hand. They became so arrogant and lazy that they allowed a foolish archonic child to create a storyline too absurd for anyone with open eyes to believe. I've done what I can by candy coating this orange pill and putting it into a high word count but easy to swallow form. Now it's up to you to take it and distribute it. Use the hacks I've given you in this video. Use them ethically. And most importantly, before you do anything else, put this video up on all your social media. Post it to everyone's Facebook timeline. Post it to TikTok, Instagram, wherever. Please remember, all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people not to repost this video. If not you, who? If not now, when? Repost this. Repost it now, or the Archons have already won. And obviously, vote for Harris so that you can defeat their latest attempts to manipulate us for their own entertainment. Part 2 of this inquiry is called Take the Red Pill Exegesis. It goes further down the rabbit hole to see who the Archons or other Matrix Masters might actually be. And also at the bottom of this, the article part of this video, you'll see Trump Chronicles, which gives an index of all my 30 or so Trump-related articles and videos. Thank you so much for your time and attention and for your help in hacking the source code that oppresses us. As James Joyce said, history is the nightmare from which I am trying to awaken. Now is the time to hack the source code and awaken from the nightmare of the Babylon Matrix.